Thank you, Christine, and good morning, everybody. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we gather, and I thank them for their stewardship of the land and the waterways here in Western Sydney especially, and I pay respects to their elders present, past, present, and emerging. Dear colleagues in ministry, on behalf of the church in Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains, I welcome you to this System Leaders Day and give thanks for your ministry of leadership. In particular, I welcome members of the board of Catholic Schools Parramatta Diocese Limited. I welcome Jack de Groot, the new Executive Director. He is the first Executive Director to work within the newly created Catholic Schools Parramatta Diocese Limited, a new incorporated entity and governance structure which commences from this very new school year, 2023. This is a significant milestone in the life of the diocese as we move decisively towards a synodal way of governance, decision-making, and mission. It has been an eventful month in the life of the church, both universally and locally. First, we had an unprecedented funeral of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, who is remembered for his great intellect, discipline, gentleness, and most of all, for his resignation, which paved the way for the election of Pope Francis. Then, just as we were still in grief, the unexpected death of our Cardinal George Pell came as a shock to many of us. He has been a larger-than-life figure for the Church in Australia in many a decade. His leadership and his influence have had a lasting, if at times polarizing, effect on rank-and-file Catholics. The death of these two leaders, coupled with the diminishing status of the Church within society and the increasing internal divisions, make us wonder about its future going forward. Let us not, however, forget that the Holy Spirit is with us. For me, it is the journey towards a synodal church that God is calling us to walk. Pope Francis's decisive embrace of the ecclesiology of the Second Vatican Council, and particularly his emphasis on synodality, has given a new lease of life to the church and its mission in the world. We are living in a time that requires a radical shift from the business-as-usual approach. It is time to embrace a new paradigm of equitable, sustainable, harmonious, shared life with and for all. I believe that as educators, we have the opportunity to form a new generation that values the common good more than individual success. Just as the Pope calls for a new politics of inclusion in the light of the systemic inequalities in the world, we also need an education that forms young people into men and women of deep empathy, solidarity, communion, as opposed to individualism and self-interest, which is at the core of our Christian tradition. For Pope Francis, what we have done wrong in the socio-political sphere is the narrow paradigm of self-interest. The Pope says that the COVID crisis has exposed our vulnerabilities. It has revealed the fallacy of individualism as the organizing principle of our Western society. It's given the lie to the myth of a self-sufficiency that sanctions rampant inequalities and frays the ties that bind societies together. And therefore, if we want a different world, we must become a different people. In the light of this systemic flaw, we are not called to simply to restart or to treat this wake-up call as an aberration. The narratives of the restarts are harmful because they naturally tend to restore balances and systemic injustices that must change. We cannot continue to maintain the status quo when it undermines the planet's sustainability and endangers the lives of the poor. We need a new beginning. That is the call of Pope Francis. So, in other words, we need a cultural shift, the conversion of minds and hearts to be a truly humble, listening, inclusive, and synodal church. We must humbly and boldly address the biggest challenge of our time and build a healthier church for future generations. This disruption calls for deep discernment and courageous action rather than fear, intransigence, and defense of the status quo. The Church has entered a new era that is characterized by a crisis of a top-down, centralized ecclesiology. With Vatican II, the ressourcement and aggiornamento led to a more biblical paradigm of the pilgrim people of God, called to be the sacraments of the kingdom and the prophetic witness in the world. The emphasis on the superiority of the ordained gave way to the ecclesial communion based on common baptism and discipleship. Pope Francis took a step further with regard to the interpretation of the ecclesiology of the people of God. He expanded the notion of a collegial discernment to involve all of the baptized. Collegiality is at the service of synodality, and therefore it must give voice to the entire people of God. Synodality has emerged as a fresh way to reimagine the future of Christianity, and hence the upcoming Synod on Synodality. And the Diocese of Parramatta is very privileged to host the visit of Sister Nathalie Bacard, who is an influence in the synodal process. I'm proud to say that the diocese is also on its way to become a synodal church that Pope Francis is calling us to. 2 years ago, we undertook the most comprehensive, professional and timely governance review ever taken among the dioceses in Australia. It provided the impetus and a launching pad for our root and branch reform of how the Church here in Parramatta should conduct its mission. I'm particularly pleased that the reviewers recognize a culture of synodality already exists in the diocese, which they call the Parramatta Way. The synodality is a way of being church and doing mission in our diocese. We have espoused the Parramatta Way, which consists in the active collaboration between clergy and laity, the diversity of membership in governance structures, and emphasizes accountability, transparency, and inclusivity. Our Parramatta Way is lived out in many ecclesial structures, including those committees and councils that are operative here. It is this inclusive approach that has enabled us to achieve greater communion, participation, and mission. If synodality is constitutive of the Church as it seeks to journey together and enable its members to exercise greater mission, then it is necessary for Catholic education to be in line with the ecclesiology of Vatican II. Synodality is about agency and discipleship. It's premised on the core notion that we have equal dignity, equal right to participate in the mission of the Church. The time has come for us to reconfigure our structures and relationships in such a way that they truly embody the life-giving, circular, symbiotic, and cooperative relational God. The time has come for us to apply across our system the core principles of Catholic social teaching of subsidiarity, solidarity, equity, and preferential option for the poor. Let us reflect these values we espouse in the mission we profess, the governance that frames our decision-making processes. Our Parramatta Catholic education system has been outstanding in doing just that, as it has built on the work of many religious and lay people over the decades. We have been known to be at the cutting edge of innovative, inquiry-based, technology-oriented, and above all, gospel-grounded education. Ours is a Christ-centered community that fosters not only intellectual growth, but just as importantly, young people's emotional, spiritual, and holistic growth. And if we are to continue to build on the magnificent legacy we have, we all need much creativity and imagination in the task still ahead of us. The new culture of collaboration, partnership, and participation that we are called to live and to signal to the world of the new social ordering is not merely a rejection of individualism. It's also about a way of life that is based on reciprocal and interconnected relationships. This is inherent in the indigenous wisdom, which acknowledges the radical independence and reciprocity within diverse webs of life. So we are called to live a new paradigm of shared purpose, diversity, inclusion, and agency. So friends, we live in uncertain and challenging times. We may be returning to the earlier times in terms of being a marginalized and even unpopular minority. But if we follow the example of our spiritual ancestors and the early church in being an alternative society, a community of justice, equity, solidarity, prayer, support, then it is indeed the future worth dedicating our lives to. So may we grow in our authentic discipleship, service, and our capacity to be kingdom builders, as aptly the song we have just sung together pointed out. We are privileged to be partners with God's plan for a shared destiny of hope, communion, and life for all. We are proud to be continued the ethos of inclusivity and offer Catholic education for all, but especially the disadvantaged. May your service as empowering leaders be a source of blessing for many. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Vincent, for those inspiring words. And I might invite you now, just in silence for just 30 seconds, just to think around from what you've heard from Bishop Vincent. What spoke to you? What call to action did you personally hear? And perhaps over the morning tea break, you might share with one another what that was for you. It's now my really great pleasure to formally welcome and introduce to you our new Executive Director of Catholic Schools, Jack de Groot. Jack, you are incredibly welcome to be here with us. We are so looking forward to getting to know you more. Jack comes to us with a distinguished career of more than 20 years of leadership across a wide range of areas, including significant roles of governance in healthcare, aid, tertiary education and social services. He's always demonstrated a strong focus on Catholic values, social outreach and promoting the mission of the Church. Please join me in giving a very, very warm welcome to our new Executive Director of Catholic Schools.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Christine, for those generous words, and Bishop Vincent for your inspiration this morning. I acknowledge the Darug and Gundungara peoples of the lands where our ministries and education find their homes, to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. In acknowledgement, we are all conscious that this is a hugely significant year for all Australians as we engage in the proposal to establish the voice of First Australians to the Parliament. To acknowledge is to listen to those who are so often not listened to. It is about pausing and not creating answers, but to listen with intent. Our schools hold a special place in this national process of the referendum to give constitutional effect to the establishment of the voice. The way campaigns of change happen best in Australia is by community conversations. Each of us here is a leader and part of a leadership team in communities across Greater Western Sydney and the Blue Mountains. It is a privileged space that we hold, and I expect that we play a constructive, supportive and safe place for such conversations that will build support for the voice. These conversations are about the future of the young people in our schools and the Australia that they are to be active citizens within. I'm truly delighted to be with you as we start this year. This is the first time in many years that you have gathered for this occasion. I was told it was called the Big Day Out. I finished school in 1983 and I went to lots of big day outs. And I'm expecting the same energy, perhaps not the same consumption of alcohol, and to be able to remember the day, which I don't always remember the big day outs I went to in the past. It's exciting to be starting with the energy and purpose of this day. It is a tremendous privilege to be with you, to meet you, and offer myself in support of leadership with you and our shared mission of the education of the students in our care. I am delighted to have been invited and been able to respond to lead Catholic Schools Parramatta Diocese Limited. I notice that that's a bit of a mouthful to get the words in the right order. So we're all on this journey together and we'll get the words in the right order more often than not. But we know who we are. The leadership that the board and I are committed to is crucially one of support to you as you lead your learning communities. We together have a shared accountability for the outcomes of this mission of Catholic education in Western Sydney. So I want you each to know that support to schools as learning communities for our students is the specific mission I am taking on. So what can I do today in real value to you? Probably not a lot. So I thought I'll go to my one area of subject matter expertise. I'll tell you about what's important to me and who I am. I grew up in Melbourne. Yes, and I support the Melbourne Demons. Now, I know that's an extraordinarily irreverent and disrespectful thing to say in this particular place. But that's what people in Melbourne have always thought about Sydney. Slightly disrespectful. I studied in Sydney and in Melbourne. Fiona and I married 28 years ago. We have 2 daughters, Bella and Florence, who have now finished school. I could tell you childhood stories, and that would be extremely boring for each of you. So I won't. I will tell you a bit about what matters, however, and what I believe in. What I know has continually shaped my working life, from working firstly in social and public policy and advocacy in Victoria on behalf of the then Archbishop of Melbourne, Frank Little, then in education in supporting school leadership teams in the Catholic Education Office of Western Australia, and to Caritas Australia and the issues of global injustice and empowered community development with peoples who struggle with the realities of global injustice and who are denied equity and the most basic of their human rights. In healthcare at St Vincent's Health Australia, and over the last half dozen years leading the St Vincent de Paul Society in New South Wales, we're giving voice and resource to those who are homeless, fleeing domestic violence, and those children in those terrible situations, and supporting those who live with the determinants of poverty was our daily activity. So what matters then? First for me is my Catholic identity in my values and imagination. Now I want you to be very careful about jumping to a definition about what I just said. My dad was a physicist in the nuclear age. He served in the Second World War. He had a robust intellect and curiosity about faith and meaning. His faith and lesson to me, even in his last weeks of life, was never to succumb to the narrowers and straighteners who demanded an inflexible follower in the church. He saw God in all things, and that a church who resided away from the world was pointless and godless. Dad knew a God who is incarnational, evolving, cosmic. He had little time for the orthodox cultural warrior. So I come from that place of faith that offers openness. Since my days as a young teenager, I have loved being present in local community and collaborating with people who know suffering. My work has always taken me to these places, and my faith has reinforced that desire to bring a change, love and service. In the last weeks, I have followed the response of Sergio and the Bethany community at Glenmore Park to the Tadros family. It reflects that worldview of presence when there is suffering. Each of you will have, I know, such stories in your communities. The second most important thing is holistic or integral development of each young person and adult that inspires my presence here with you in this ministry today. The integral view sees the individual and the community as agents of resilience in the face of suffering, and that each of us is to be the author of our own development. For me, a Catholic education is about the imagination and the world of seeing everything through the lens of the student. It is student-centred. It is holistic about that student and learning community. It is about the performance and the transformation of human flourishing. As educators and in this shared ministry, we are peddlers of meaning-making. And there is a huge hunger amongst parents, families and communities for such work. An education premised on the transaction of knowledge and skills transference that is hungry and equipped for values formation and focused on taking the risk to go to places where people have had no access or no equity of access to educational resources and learning outcomes is truly exciting. To go to the edges means we are all confident that the core offering we have is strong and that we have great confidence to make a difference to those who've been denied voice, participation, access, resources. Western Sydney excites me because it never underestimates the human aspirations and flourishing of its community. It's hungry for access, for equity, for all boats to rise. It flourishes because it has the largest communities of First Australians wanting voice. It has the largest community of the most recent arrivals who have often experienced lack of voice as they left countries and came to give voice and hope to their families. It has the largest communities who live the most severe challenges of the social determinants of well-being, as demonstrated during the lockdowns. So that holistic, student-centred approach matters, and that is why the board and I embrace and are excited by each of your demonstrated commitments to student and learning outcomes, as well as the well-being of that essential and integral approach to human development. You can tell, I hope, for me and as for Bishop Vincent, that inclusion is important. It is about who gets to the centre of our planning and decision making. Your modelling and courage of this work in giving safe space for people who have often felt alienated and excluded is tremendous. Your work with First Australian communities and Aboriginal perspectives in the curriculum matters. The work on inclusion of families with disability, the work on safe space for young people forming their identity in terms of gender and sexuality gives so many families comfort and courage. Excellence is something that has shaped my work in the last decade or more. Not because I'm excellent, but because what excellence does. In healthcare, no one wants adequate surgery or acceptable basic therapy for cancer. We expect that our caregivers will, with compassion, give us the best experience on a journey of healing. Our experience of the divine is a relentless hunger for excellence. And it is for each person, not for those alone with the capacity to pay. It is no different in the minds of the board as we met yesterday, and for me, that excellence in educational outcomes is what we are supporting you to achieve. I know enough about the aspiration and stories of Catholic education in Australia, and that this diocese, as the birthplace of such human aspiration, has always wanted the more for our students and families, the more of human flourishing, not of materialism. Your strengths in innovation of educational programs means the pursuit of excellence is there, and it needs to be brought to the light of our communities in Greater Western Sydney. A strength-based thinking matters to me. It's core for high-performing teams. Thinking from the deficit can be the deathbed of human endeavour. I have lived and visited communities in the world where people are without land, income, and access to resources. And yet, they map their community assets of strength and resilience. And when that is done, how they flourish, even with nothing. of material access. When people are told they are lacking, then it is often too hard. When we are strength-based, the appetite is amazing for change. Partnership matters and is the future of success. How we partner among ourselves in this great system of 86 learning communities will be exciting to discover. How we look to learn from the Church of Parramatta in all of its manifestations of presence is a huge opportunity for us. The work that Anthony Goonan and the Community Ventures leads through the Ambrose services of early learning give us all hope for us to have an educational experience from the earliest moments through to ongoing partnerships with universities and centres of vocational learning, meaning that we are creating the bedrock of lifelong learning. Finally, what matters to me is the consistent ethic of life or the seamless garment of our mission to the world. As leaders of Catholic schools, you are often going to be a sign of contradiction to parents and families as you place at the centre of your learning communities the student. We partner with families, and yet because of our belief and commitment to human flourishing, in the inherent dignity of each person, and our knowledge of the spark of the divine, we will make at times tough decisions to include the voice of the voiceless. So these are the things that matter to me. These are your strengths. The role of the board and myself as we develop our leadership with you in service to you is to support these dimensions of Catholic education. I look forward to meeting you, to talking with you, to visiting you and learning from you, to delight in what you do, for which I thank you. I wish you the best for this exciting stage in your learning communities in 2023. Thank you.
Michael, are you there? It's Mark.
Thank you so much, Jack, for giving us great insights into your beliefs, your background. I think I speak on behalf of everyone here present when I can say we are in great hands under your leadership. So congratulations and welcome, Jack, again. Our next presenter is Michael Fullan, and Michael is coming to us virtually today.
We need to see
and
your video.
hopefully our technology is going to work seamlessly, and you will see him appearing on our screen imminently. Michael is a person who is known to many of us in the room. I'm sure that almost everyone present here today has read at least one of Michael's many books. Many of us have also had the great privilege of working closely with Michael at different times over recent years. Michael has been a critical friend to us in this diocese for an extensive period of time. Michael is the former Dean of the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education and Professor Emeritus of the University of Toronto. He's co-leader of the New Pedagogies for Deep Learning Global Initiatives. Michael is recognised as a worldwide authority on educational reform. He advises policymakers and local leaders in helping to achieve the moral purpose of learning. Michael received the Order of Canada in December 2012. He holds honorary doctorates from several universities around the world. Michael is a prolific author, and many of his books have won great awards. And as I mentioned earlier, Michael, before you joined us on the screen, I believe that each and every one of us have read so many of your wonderful works. Michael is also the author of our prescribed text for this year, Unfortunately, we've had a bit of a delay with delivery, so the text will actually be delivered to schools, and you'll also receive a link for reading it online, which I've had the opportunity already to do. And that book is called Spirit Work and the Science of Collaboration. Michael also has another book coming out very soon, which I also believe will be of great use to us, called The Principle 2.0. Please join me now in welcoming Michael to lead us in a conversation.
Thank you very much, Christine, and hello to everyone. It is a bit strange to be back with Parramatta. I have been there, I would say, 3 times a year for over a decade, 2008 to 2019, and we did a lot of work together. And so I still feel close to you, and I also feel, for so many different reasons that you've heard from the Bishop and the new director, that this is a new chapter. It's actually consistent with the past in some ways, but an opportunity to make some transformational change. And it is no accident that this new chapter is a strong sign for change. And I don't want to just talk theoretically. So let me say a few things about positioning this work. We always have built our ideas on practice. It comes from practice. 80% of our best ideas come from leading practitioners, which we now develop and feed back to people. So that's the source of inspiration. But we put, and you'll see in the slides in a few moments, that we put some definition around that, sometimes through the books. Every book you see from me will have case vignettes of many different versions of the new development. So this is really compatible. The other combination at the let's say the big level, I have a team of about 10 people. We mix and match on a lot of different projects in probably 20 different countries. Those projects are in 2 overlapping themes. One is new pedagogies for deep learning, which I'll touch on, how to get strong new learning established. And the other one is system change, which you heard again, both the Bishop and the new director refer to. System change, for the first time in my 40 years, probably more, is really a significant practical possibility. And that's the difference from pre-COVID. Not caused by COVID, enabled a little bit by it, but the timing is such that this is a time for systematic change, what we call systemness. And I will say in my work with Parramatta, it's always been attention. What's the role of the school? What's the role of the center? How do we resolve that? And we're making good development on that. Also at the general level, I have some propensity, I guess I'll say, to work with the Catholic systems, or maybe vice versa. So we worked for a long time, as I've already said, with Greg Whitby and the team there at Parramatta. I know you've reconstituted and your Catholic diocese is limited, so that's good. We've also worked for a long time with Brisbane Catholic Education, or again, over almost the same period of time. And thirdly, with CWA, Catholic Education WA, where we have the same parallel development. So I feel like I've got the country at least a bit by the connections of those combinations. So when we now say with our work that we are zeroing in on systemness, and that's the phrase I want to use. Systemness is the sense that everyone in that room has that they are part of a connected system, that they have their own autonomy, which we call connected autonomy, but they also have their own collective responsibility that takes place at different levels, local and then up beyond that. In New South Wales, I should mention also, because that's your context, over the last 12 months by video, I've had several sessions with the School Leadership Institute, which is the institute that does the professional learning for the leaders in New South Wales government schools. So we've been talking these themes for the last 12 months there. And I've had a similar and even more partner connection with Australia Independent Schools, New South Wales, where they are part of our new pedagogy. So I really feel like I won't claim to be family, but I feel close. And so I want to take that now into the what you should have in terms of what I said ahead. I sent ahead a slide deck that you will have in PDF format. So I'm going to use that as the structure of what I'm going to say. There are 2 or 3 times in this next time frame that I have where you will be able to, for 5 minutes at the table in groups of 2, 3, 4, to process some of it. And there'll be also the opportunity to ask questions through the chat. And then finally, on the way of disorganization, of the organization of what we're talking about, I have suggested that with the leaders of this conference, that if you want to do a more systematic follow-up from today, we can use the Padlet or the Bitly that we always use, which will afterwards give you an opportunity to raise questions, let's say for the next 10 days. We usually do the Bitly in 2 ways. What idea did you find most appealing and why? And the second is, what question do you find most troubling? And if we get a number of responses to that over the 10 days after today, I'm very pleased or happy to put together a written response, a short document that would respond to those, because it's obviously very clear that you are taking off into a brand new system change that is definitely not ordinary. So I'm going to put my slides up on the screen now, and then you have the PDF, so you should be able to follow it. But let me then use those slides as the guide to the subsequent combination. So you'll see the leadership slide, Leadership for School and Systems Change. That's what it is about. It's about your own, and I was very happy to hear the new directors say that their primary mission is support. But support means not passive support. It means proactive forming of more and more clusters of effectiveness. So I will spell that out. And I want to say this very directly, that this is based on practice. It's captured in the last 3 books I did, 2 of which are about to come out and the other one a year ago. So these are really you talking to me and back to you. Those 3 books are Spirit Change, Spirit Work that you heard referred to. The second one is Principle 2.0, which is coming out from the publisher any day in February. And the third one is called Drivers, the Humanity Paradigm, which is very apropos to what we've heard in the last half hour. So let's just take in that frame. And I couldn't have had a better kind of introduction or pre-staging of it than what we heard from the bishop, from your new director, that we consider this to be the very time, 2003 in particular, and significantly the next 3, 4, 5 years, to be a battle of the paradigms. The old paradigm, which I've called here laissez-faire or indifference, and I thought it was, I thought the phrase that I think it was the director that said this, or the bishop as well, the narrow paradigm of self-interest. Laissez-faire is the narrow paradigm of self-interest. It counts on or allows things to happen as they happen. And so it doesn't try to steer that, it just whatever is happens to be. And we know, and we have reams of data to show this, that the public school system, in fact, all of learning, has suffered in the last 50 years because this has been the paradigm. The laissez-faire, allow it to happen. The contrary to that, the opposite, the power, is what we have called the humanity paradigm. And you heard a lot of it in this last 45 minutes, a deep care and commitment to all living things. So narrow individualism is not the humanity paradigm, and even care to humanity without care to the planet, the universe, to all things living, doesn't really fit. So this is, and I want to say this as well, we are working on this practically. I'll show you the practical solutions in a moment. What we call the humanity paradigm is the new governance. I guess I would say in my own case, I have moved from moral purpose, which still is there, to a deeper concept, which is human spirit. Human spirit is much deeper than moral purpose. It covers all living things. It covers Indigenous and First Nations values. It covers the values we aspire to but haven't yet achieved. So you see the 6 elements of the humanity paradigm. Those will become clear as I go through this developments. Now, I call this arbitrarily 3 years, but you can take 5 years, but don't take 1. That this is a kind of a transformation pact that we see with the partner systems we work with. It needs to be locally driven, which means the dioceses, but it also means the schools and communities. It needs to be laterally linked, internal to your system, but outside the system as well. And it needs to be system leverage. Let's just let that dangle. What does system leverage mean? The need for change, I really don't have to say very much about this. We have reams of data that support these 4 points. Point number 1, traditional schooling is boring at best, alienating at worst. So it just hasn't, and it's no fault of its own. It's the old paradigm. It's not changed for literally 200 years. We just wrote a chapter on this. 200 years, and especially the last 50, things actually overall are beginning worse and worse, not better. And that's because the paradigm is wrong. Secondly, inequity and inequality is widening. The last 50 years, the data is striking. It's about economic gaps that have increased, galloping almost, but it's also about social possibilities. Again, you heard a lot of that in the last hour. The world is troubled, 2 troubles, climate change and social degradation. Social degradation is growing mistrust among subgroups and combinations therein. So that's the bad news. The good news is that we think the deep learning and other aspects of that we are engaged in cooperatively with systems around the world has a tremendous amount of promise. We have it evidenced now. I won't say that it's evidence that 100% is happening, but I'm saying big systems are happening, and we've documented a lot of this, and we've put out a challenge that this is the agenda of the next 3 years. Let's take the decade, why not? The next period. This is different. This is a different chapter. The future is up for grabs. I want to say it this way. When I first coined that phrase or stated that, I said, well, really, it's going to be positive because COVID is disrupted. It's allowed us to do the new things. But now when I think about it, I say it actually could go either way. If you focus on learning loss and other negative things, you end up going backwards, back to the status quo, staying at the status quo. I think that was the phrase that the director used and the bishop used, that the status quo has been the problem. Individualism has been the problem. And our findings agree with that. So this is the battle of the decade. One of our colleagues at Harvard, Jal Mehta, who's been studying deep learning, he has a nice rendition of this. I think that summarizes it very well. He calls it the yawning gap between how schools are organized and how youth learn or would like to learn. And you see the 5 points there. I hope you're able to follow it on with your handout on the PDF, that there's a disconnect here. And when Sandra Milligan, who we also partnered with, she's the professor of assessment at Melbourne University, they have a major project the last 3 years going into the next 3 called New Metrics. And new metrics are assessing outcomes such as the 6 competencies, the global competencies, that are much better measures of what students think they want to do and what they should be developing. So right now we are underusing students, we under-involving students, and they are more and more from us an example of what the solution should be. I've taken the last 12 months to write 3 or 4 op-eds or blogs for the national magazine in the US called Ed Week, and one of them is called Students as Change Makers, and it documents what should and could happen. So this, we really know the problems. We really know in theory the solutions, but we haven't cultivated the depth of those solutions. There's a few times in the course of the next hour I have with you, and we'll have quite, this is the kind of the format. I'm going to present things. A few times I'm going to say, in small groups of 2, 3, 4, process this. So I'll do that a couple of times. And then I'll encourage you anytime to feed the chat about questions or observations that somebody at your end will select in the last 20 minutes we have. We'll have questions. Some of those questions, from my point of view, could come from the floor with microphones, or they could be curated, as they say, from the chat. Either way is good, but I do want to hear about your reaction. This I'm not going to ask you to do by way of processing it right now, because I think the time is needs to be focused on this. This is a good homework assignment. One of our colleagues, Valerie Hannon, has done a really great book on the future of learning and what innovation that. And in that, right at the beginning, she had a list of 9 factors that she called the pandemic shock. And if we were in a face-to-face workshop, I would spend 20 minutes now with you, but I want to say, do this with your staff. Do with this with whatever group you have. You can read the 9 lessons. They're very clear. They jump out at you. In small groups, you can identify the 3 lessons that you most agree with. And then, same group, and then pool it. You can take actions that leverage this. This is a great opportunity to use the pandemic shock as a leverage for change. And it's very specific to be able to derive it from that. So this is one resource that you can have in addition to the slides. Second thing, and again, I won't do this in detail with you, because this is not a workshop style as much as I would like. I did another op-ed. It's about 5, 6 of them. This is called The 6 Reasons to be Optimistic About Learning in 2022. This was about a year ago I wrote this, and inside it you'll see those reasons. These are the reasons: your opportunity to escape an ineffective system, your opportunity to work and find your best allies. Who are your best allies coming out of COVID? Teachers, other teachers, students, community. Your best allies are closest to you. Third, well-being and learning is now joint force. We've had both of them. The difficulty is how to integrate them. That's what we have as part of our model. There's new powerful forms of learning on the rise. Deep learning is one of them. The neuroscience of deep learning is another. More practical, more profound, more available now than ever before. Diverse leadership will grow and present new benefits, probably in your system. And I didn't see the types of, the people that stood up that are new in the system, but I'm going to predict that you have now, compared to any time in the last 10 years, a whole group of new leaders who are more diverse and who can interact with those that were there to produce a new profile of development. And that systems will begin to change. I'm going to leave to the end this tricky problem of what is systemness. And I'll just say it about system. Systemness is too important to leave to top leaders. They never get it right, and they don't stay around long enough. Top leaders are at the state level, but top leaders can be at your dioceses as well. We have to have the power and the drive coming upward from the base to the middle to the top, and then reverberating the other way. And then it was mentioned that this was the book you were supposed to have. It's the book we published 12 months ago, Spirit Work. I did it with Mark Edwards, who is a retired superintendent in the United States, and it was a U.S. Sample. And they said, look at the districts, or thousands of districts in the U.S., and select some that are really, despite the difficulties, doing very well. And in it, we profiled 7 districts. They range from 30 schools to 200 schools. So they're small, big, and some of them are larger than yours. And in it, we found that Spirit Work, and I'll come back to that, is a major anchor of the new work. Now, this one is really the newest framework. And when I use them, they need to be practical. But there's some new terminology here. You see it on the screen. And it is powerful, and it's meaningful. And I don't like to use jargon. So if I'm using something that looks like jargon, I'm going to say in defense, it's actually grounded in the examples that we have found. So we'll come into these as we look at them in detail. Spirit Work, we'll define in a few moments. It's the humanity paradigm implemented where the shift is from individual development to collective development that's deeper than moral purpose. Includes moral purpose, it's deeper. It's literally about the humanity paradigm. It's literally about saving the future. Contextual literacy is a second new concept I've used. I don't use jargon for the sake of it. Contextual literacy actually is a fabulous new image. Contextual literacy means that every leader who's going to be effective has to be knowledge about the context in which they work. They have to know that the learning of that or the nature of their culture. And when you go to a new, if you're new to a district or new to a school or just your own school, when I think of contextual literacy and I think of learning from the leader, I think of two things. One is that you have to have some expertise, or presumably you wouldn't have been appointed, so let's not hide that, let's make it strong. But in addition to your own expertise, if you're coming to a system, you have to be humble enough to know that you're an apprentice to learning things about that culture that you don't know because you haven't been in it. Or if you've been in it and you haven't been learning about it, you still don't know. So the dual purpose here is articulate lines of development, which is your expertise, and always learn and enable the learning of others in order to really say, what can I learn from the culture in order to make it better? Systemness, I've said, a new awareness, you'll really need to see the way I position it because it's an integrating concept. Connected autonomy, I prefer that to collaboration, even though I like both. But connected autonomy means that dynamic equilibrium where I'm autonomous. Isolation is bad. Autonomy is pretty good. But I'm also, when I'm autonomous, I'm connected. I'm connected inside my school and community. I'm connected wider than that. I'm connected in the dioceses. I'm really part of this system. So those are the lead-in concepts. They're more visually presented here. But I do want to take this diagram to talk about the lead learners. All of you in that room are lead learners. Lead learners means two things. The first one is power. The second one is very powerful as well as the first, but let's think of it. The most obvious one of the lead learner is you model learning. You're a lead learner. You are showing that you're always learning and that you're open to learning. The other part that's not so obvious but very powerful, obviously, once you define it, is that your job is to develop the leadership in others while you're a leader. So at the end of your tenure, let's say it's 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, what's the mark of a good leader is not only the impact they've made on the quality of the system, but also equally, and perhaps even more important, how many good leaders they've left behind who can continue. So I wouldn't consider you to be a successful leader at the end of 5 or 6 years unless I can see that there's a lot of leadership that you've created that's going to carry on in this similar agenda. That's a very important distinction. So here's some more nuts and bolts, I guess I'll say. This is a quote from our book. We define spirit work as the members coping and developing under complex and adverse conditions of society. We have very specific ways of talking about that I'll introduce to you. One of the people who did the preface to our book, the foreword, is Margaret Wheatley. If you know the leadership work, you will know that she's a famous character or leadership developer for the last 60 years. She's still alive. She said, I want to write the foreword to your book because I like what you're doing. And this is what she said. You can read it in your own part, but she said, this is the most important thing, to persevere under the injustices and to create the kind of spiritual collaborative work that we're talking about. Contextual literacy, I'm going to be not so detailed because I've introduced these concepts. You can dwell on this. I really do invite you to think carefully about what is contextual literacy. It's bound to be a new concept because we just coined it in the last 12 months, but it's a powerful, meaningful, action-oriented context. Find out what it means to you. Systemness, I keep leaving that to the end because I need to build the case for it, but it is locating one's place. If whoever you are in that room, not only do you have a role for your particular assignment, your role description, but you are required to be a system leader. What does that mean to be a system leader while you're a principal, while you're a consultant, while you're a technical support person? What does it mean? And I'm going to set the challenge now, and I'm going to answer the question in a sense as we come to the end of this. Connected autonomy, I have forwarded an article we did that Brendan Spillane, who's a sports consultant and an education consultant in WA, we've worked with him in both Brisbane and in Siwa, and we've developed the concept of connected autonomy, and we wrote an article about it. I've given it in the package. I'm not going to use it today, but I'm going to suggest that you follow up from today by having subgroups read it, pull out the implications for the actions we're talking about. Here's a kind of dynamic diagram, I guess I'll say. And I want to set the stage, but I won't be able to, in this diagram, answer the questions. But you're a system. And as a system, in the Catholic schools, Parramatta Diocese Limited, in that system, systems are prone to be either too centralized or too decentralized, fragmented or episodic, whatever. And what I've tried to do here is be completely systematic. And these are 1, 2, 3, 4 is not the order, it's simultaneous. But this is what I mean by systemness at one level. One is you have a strong presence of intra-school collaboration. So the collaborative culture, I mean with parents and students, community, you've got a strong internal culture at the local level. Number 2, you also work with other schools, or you learn and contribute to other schools. That's lateral. Might be regional, but it might be wider than that. So that's a second thing. Each of these 4 contribute to whether or not you have connected autonomy, whether or not have systemness. Third one, district level teamness. You're going to have, by definition, a new district team that the 12 or so people I used to work with, meet when I came there, met frequently with, they were all on the central team. They all had different roles, but they had to focus as a team. Now you've got a new director, and you've got a set of new team members among the 12. And so the degree to which that team becomes a team is important, obviously. And I can say it this way, if that central team doesn't have its act together, the individual schools will perceive that lack of teamness, and it will be dysfunctional for any coherence you want to achieve. So they have to be internally have their act together. And then number 4, the 1, 2, and 3 result in this nirvana, this combination where the schools and districts began to see each other as we have a we commitment to this system. It's not we, they. This is a mutual kind of integration of the ideas. So these are really important. The book before Spirit that I wrote was called Nuance, and I won't really come into that except to say one of the difficulties of coming to the best possible leadership, best possible conclusion in system change is that it's pretty much nuanced. It's complicated, and the leaders who are best have nuanced insights into that. So the 2019 book I wrote called Nuance has many examples, maybe 6, 7, 8 examples of this is what nuance. I actually got stimulated the concept of nuance from Leonardo da Vinci, who really exemplified when he did his work, including the Mona Lisa, how you come back and forth to the weeds, as some people call it, to begin to get better pictures, to begin to see the nuances in what you're there, to pull it together in a way that people find compelling and wanting to emulate. So nuance is big. It's not straightforward. That's why otherwise it would have been solved. A couple of insights from our field-based people. I love these things because they're not my insights, except they become my insights. So in Nuance, and also in the new book on Principle 2.0, you'll see a case study from Ben Adler's school, which is a school in northern England that was absolutely, for a decade or more, among the worst schools in the country. And that's hard. There's a lot of schools, 20,000 primary schools in England. So it was among the worst, had been day after day. A new principal came in, and the story is in the book, the Nuance book, and the elaborated story is in the principal book. But the last time I interviewed the principal and the assistant principal, which was about 4 months ago before I put it in the new principal book. This is what the assistant principal said. His name is Sam Coy, C-O-Y. You'll see his reference there. He said, I said, how have you been able to, this diverse community and all this negativism, really being able to make some development work? And this, literally, this is what he said. You can only build trust by really engaging the community. Okay, we accept that. But here's the insight. Leaders get that wrong when they first try to be aspirational instead of being relational, for starters. In other words, if you want to develop a group, build a relationship with them. Have the vision, but don't expect the vision to carry the day if you haven't attended to the trust and the relationships and the power of that collaboration that comes from. Brilliant. Secondly, this is from the principal of Ben Adler. Her name is Marie Claire Bretherton. She said, because this is humanity work, this is deep work. This work was desperate in Ben Adler School. The students were suffering. There was prostitution among the in the community, among the schools. It was a hellhole. There's no question. It's not. They readily say that this was the analysis. And she said this, and I won't read it word by word, but she said, if you're going to take a journey of humanity with a poverty community or any other troubled community, you better understand what they're going through and understand it as a human yourself if you're going to really be helpful. This is coming from the field. This is the principal of the school who actually, incidentally, took that worst school in the country almost, certainly the bottom 5 out of 20,000, and turned it into an award-winning school in 24 months. We can talk about how to do that. So you've heard, the bishop, you've heard the director, you've heard enough about me. I want to give you now about 8 minutes. We don't have to be that precise, but I will. 8 minutes in your small group at your table. I saw the tables. It could be in 2s, 3s, or 4s, but don't make it 6 or 7. You won't get enough airtime. But here's what I want you to talk about. A note to yourself or a discussion with yourself. What idea best connected with you so far? Include what you heard before me, but also me. And secondly, what question or puzzle is foremost on your mind? So in groups of 2, 3s, maximum of 4, you have exactly 8 minutes to discuss that, and then I will come back and build on it. Way you go for 8 minutes.
have jet lag?
Okay, that's about 8 minutes. If you would organize yourselves back at the table, give you about 2 minutes to do that. I think somebody there will help facilitate that, but in about 2 minutes, I'm going to start up and build on this. So back to your tables. Okay, so we're going to do, I'm going to do 30 minutes of more presentation and then about 15 minutes of Q&A back from your end that will be facilitated by the microphone. So the next 40 plus minutes, we'll do both of those. So let's me add to this. I'm giving you here resources that you can use with your school and community. So a second piece I did that for the op-ed is called Students as Changemakers. And you have that handout with you. You see that 6 reasons, and this is really, in terms of system, turn in the strategy for system change, which is the rise of young people, individually and collectively, to be the agents of change, working cooperatively with each other and with teachers and with the system. So you see, I've mentioned 6 of those. You can do that. You can use this op-ed, it's only 1,000 words or something, as a way of having a subgroup. You can have people read the article. You can have people identify the two of those they think are the most powerful, discuss them, decide how to do them. All of that needs to be processed in the usual way. But I'm going to show you a 2-minute video here. It's not, you can't capture student work in one video, obviously. We've got actually probably 500 videos. But this is a school, a high school, a secondary school we work with just north of Toronto called Bill Hogarth Secondary School. And it's a school that's built on the six competencies. If you go to their school, you'll see the external pillars of the school. Each of them, it has one of the 6 C's. So citizenship, character, et cetera, all 6 C's. And they've internalized and to develop it. And in this one thing, I'm going to show you only 2 minutes of a 12-minute clip. Our students, where a teacher has brought the students together to talk about the role of prejudice, the role of difficulty, and you see how easily they bring these out in the open. It's because they've been working since they established the school to be exactly like this. This is a big school, not giant school, but almost 1,000 students. This is typical of how reams of students can talk in that school. I've been there many times. So take a listen to this.
Hello, York Region District School Board, educators, support staff, and system administrators. My name is Mamta Sivapada Sundaram, and I am an educator here at Bill Hogarth Secondary School. First off, I would like to start off by thanking all of you for taking the time to listen to our students as they engage in a conversation related to creating equitable, inclusive, and identity-affirming learning environments. Our leadership students here at Bill Hogarth Secondary School are well aware of their role in contributing to a respectful, helpful, and compassionate local and global community. So today, I'd like to start off by engaging in a conversation with all of you. And to start off, my first question for you is, you are all change makers. You've made a positive impact in your school community and sometimes beyond. What can students do to help to create change within their school community? What can staff members do to help create the conditions to help students create and engage in social change?
I'm going to answer that question. I'm Cameron Davis. I'm a grade 12 student here at Bill Hogarth.
And I think when it comes to my activism pathway, my activism career, it started back in grade 10. I did a speech at a Markham Black Lives Matter protest. I posted it on YouTube and it went viral. I think that when it comes to being a change maker, it's all about saying what you believe in, speaking from the heart, and making sure that everyone that you're talking to, everyone that you're trying to address in your story is someone who's going to listen. So when it comes to students, I want to make sure that they know that have your teachers listen to you. You're in the right, you know your perspective, you know what you're going to be talking about, and it's up to the teachers to be willing to listen, be willing to learn from it, and then act upon it afterwards. When I was in grade 10, I had to speak about, it was a history class, and I had to speak about the settlers and how we defined them, the tone we used to address them. And my teacher was using a very passive tone. They were using settlers. And I had to speak. I spoke out and I said, they're not settlers, they're colonizers. That terminology that we're using, that tone we're using is very important when we're talking about these issues. And they embraced it. They were accepting of it. And it was a progressive sense of change. And all teachers need to be like that, where they're not defensive, where they're not worried about what the classroom will think or they won't act different afterwards. It's about the teachers understanding that this whole classroom environment is a learning experience. And as long as the students are learning from their own experiences and what the teacher is saying, the teachers can learn as well from the students.
Okay, the other 4 students have their own versions of that. That school, 800 to 900 by now, they're all conscious, explicit about being change makers. It's easy to have a slogan that students are change makers. It's harder to have a culture where it's so naturally built in. And they take leadership courses, they do all those things. This is the best way of learning, actually, for students, as you know. So maybe you want to take that up in questions, but this is the real thing, and it's happening because the administrators, the principal, you saw the teacher there, they're creating it with students, and it's powerful. System change, I'll come back to it at the end, but here's some guidelines right now. Don't define it from the top down. System change, and again, you heard your new director say, his vision, his value is to support change at the school level. That's the leader saying, I don't want to be top down. I'll be participating in it, but I want to see a lot of bottom-up development that I can relate to. Define it from the bottom and middle up around deep learning. We'll say something about deep learning briefly. And then systemness is when students, teachers, and others are helped to think differently about their systems. They become aware that it's not just a single school or classroom or community. And interestingly, one of the things about COVID, because of the way in which everything's become more transparent, we know, because we've documented it, that students and teachers are more, and parents are more aware that there is a system than they were before COVID. And a case study, just to give you more evidence around this, because it's a Catholic school, I recommended This Way District. One of our leaders, and it's a big school district, 83 schools, not giant, but big, Ottawa Catholic School Board, in the capital of Canada, but in the province of Ontario, joined us in 2015 and has a fantastic total system, 83 schools. Year 1, 7 schools started. Year 2, 8 joined, that's 15. Year 3, the rest. And we've, in the Principle 2.0, I presented it as a case study, 10 or so pages. It's absolutely documented. It's the real McCoy, and they built it from the ground up. That's systemness, at least within that system. So it's a new gap for people. It's a absolutely transition point that started prior to the COVID, but has been, it's enabled by COVID, but I don't think it's automatic. I think it could go negative if you just focus on systemness. And I would say, if we want to talk later at the end, the last 15 minutes, about that plan. New metrics. It's a powerful system breakthrough. So let's do a little kind of review on what I call change agentry in complex time. This is a list of, when we work with change, we get a lot of insights about change that are coming from practitioners that you would not normally find in the research books. because they're more nuanced. They're more up close to the action. And these are the ones that I think are my favorites, I guess, when I pull them together. You need to practice impressive empathy, a new concept. We coined it. I think I haven't seen it before. What is impressive empathy? And impressive empathy is when you have empathy for other people who are in your way. That's why it's impressive. They are in your way. And you really may find other good reasons why they're like that. You may find a way to overcome it. But whatever it is, you're attuned to the contextual literacy of who is most having the most problems. And you have a compassionate, impressive empathy approach to try to break through into a new relationship. It takes patience to change minds. I know how many of you have been in arguments where you think you'll never get anywhere. You can't win the argument by being louder in your points. You have to have the patience of developing a relationship. Say fewer things and say them more often. We have too diffuse. If you have 20 things you're advocating, it's too many. If you have 4 or 5 that you're focusing on, like we are, spirit work, contextual literacy, systemness, it's only 3. Say them often and develop them often. Help all those who are with you to become more precise. I love this new phrase that we derive from the field. I think they're probably my words, but the concept came from the field. Specificity without imposition. Beautiful change phrase. You want to achieve specificity because, for example, we're committed to saving the world. It's too general. You want to be specific about what those things are. So strive for specificity, but the change guideline is don't try to impose it, because imposing change never works. So how do we get specificity without imposition? By being non-judgmental, by being transparent, by getting good practice development, by sharing the details, by having the kind of accountability that's based on people not being judged quickly and often, but being able to get better. And that when you do that, you actually see that people develop better. Richard Elmore said this, I think, 10 years ago. No amount of external accountability will be effective in the absence of internal accountability. Internal accountability is the kind of culture that produces specificity without imposition. Seek allies inside and outside the organization. Here's a big one. I think this is really important. It's the main message of the new book, Principle 2.0. It basically says the role of the school and the community, the principal, if you like, is to make the internal system the driver. The internal system is the school, is community. And we get a distinction here because it depends on the circumstances. When some of the work I do in the US, I'm thinking of the internal system being the principal in the community because the district is not doing the right things. So they become part of the problem. But I want the school to be the driver. But if you have a rapport with your district, which you do in Parramatta now, and you can build on this, then the internal system is the district plus the local community. And the idea is to build up your internal system so that you're going to be most effective with whatever is happening outside yours in the state, the educational policies, the conflicts in society, all of the things that are part of your wider paradigm. So building the internal system is the concept. The system is one where there's a very strong coherence to the group doing that. And in your case, I prefer that the system be thought of as Parramatta. Parramatta Catholic is the system. The new agenda, this is our change work describing this. Engage the world, change the world. This is students, when they have their wider involvement, they have this sense that they are doing something. Remember the yawning gap on that last item was students want to make a contribution. They want to belong, but they want to be part of something important. And there's many contributions to be made in 2023. So it's also, and I was really happy to hear in the lead-in speeches that the narrow paradigm of self-awareness, of self-serving, narrow paradigm, this is the opposite. This is not individual development. Historically, the school systems have been built on, I guess I'll say, academic individual development as being the driver. And now we see that they have to be built on individual plus collaborative or small group, plus societal development or community development. Well-being and learning now becomes co-equal, not just learning, and how that development, we've spelled that out in our own work. So connecting young people to purpose and identity, bigger themselves. One of the researchers we work with in California is a person named Jeff Duncan Andrade, working in very difficult circumstances, lots of poverty, racism, kids sleeping on the streets, a lot of like massive poverty. And he basically says a young person cannot be well if they're thriving in a school where others around them are suffering. He's moved this from the individual to the collective to the bigger part. So this is encouraging. It's coming from more and more in our work in California. We are working, for example, in San Diego County, which is one of the counties that districts in the California province, state. And in it, it's big. The California, San Diego County has 43 school districts and 500,000 students, 43 sub-districts and 500,000 students. They have committed for the next 5 years, and we're working with them to reduce poverty and increase deep learning as the public goal. And then you get specific, et cetera. This is a huge change from 1 year ago, let alone 5 years ago. So we call our part of this NPDL, New Pedagogies for Deep Learning. Independent Schools, NSW is a member of it, producing a lot of things. They had a conference in October that I spoke to from remote about their schools and how they were developing. We have other schools in other parts of the country. But what is deep learning? Deep learning has a lot of elements to implement more deeply the system changes I've been referring to and that you heard in the front end speeches of this conference. It's about deep learning, which is a learning that focuses on the competencies that I'll list in a few moments. That is about learning to be good at life and good at learning, having that permanent capacity to work individually and together. We have to not only take learning, but we have to integrate, as you are trying to do, equity and well-being. One of our members is a cognitive scientist. Her name is Dr. Jean Clinton. And she's helped us develop what we call, in terms of the metaphor at least, the double helix of human thriving, which is how well-being and deep learning really feed on each other. It's a metaphor, but it's also an image that contains a powerful strategy. What do we mean by deep learning? The learning part of it. This is the learning part of it, the 6 C's. Again, I'm not going to take a lot of time because we don't have much in this front end presentation, but these 6 C's are the essence of the new purpose, and each of those C's is defined operationally. They have progressions, how to measure them. People start with 2 or 3 and they add to that. The 6 C's are a better agenda than NAPLAN. Let me put it that way. If you develop these 6 C's, you have graduates who are effective in their own lives and their lives of working with others. We have a lot of documentation of this. A lot of those students that you saw in the group from Bill Hogarth School, they talk the 6 C's all the time. If I go into that school and I say, what are you working on? Any given student out of the blue will say, well, we've been working on collaboration. This is what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. It comes alive. It comes into the fabric of the school. So the wellness, the youth wellness, excuse me, is the key to a prosperous future. We know that, but you have to build the elements around it. So that's how strong the community becomes. The humanity paradigm prevails when poverty and bigotry disappear. This is kind of, it seems almost simple to say it that way. But if you look at the history of society in the last however many decades or even millions of years you want to take, well, not millions, but thousands, that you will find that actually poverty, if you want to look at the data, poverty in the world decreased a little bit in some of those nations because people were working on it until about 2015. And then now it's increasing again because the inequity and the inequality is more pronounced. So prejudice as well as poverty, and then the learning. These are the two books that are just coming out. February is the one on the left, and probably June, the one on the right that we've just literally writing the last chapter. The Drivers, it's called. I'm doing with my co-worker Joanne Quinn. A couple more ideas, then I'll throw it back to you. Here's I call it the mystery of system change because it is a mystery. But what I've done is taken our knowledge about system change and turned it on its head. When we did system change in Ontario in 2003 to 2012, we did a good job of increasing literacy, numeracy, high school graduation. We had top down in some ways about the priorities, but we had partnerships with the 72 school districts and the 5,000 schools, and it worked. I was quite, in 2013, I said, okay, this is the answer, have a good partnership. But then the decade 2010 to 2020 went downward. And the reason it went downward is I think there are two things I didn't know or take into account or weren't happening then. One is that the agenda is far more complicated in 2013 than it was in 2012, way more complicated. So you can't get the same results. And the second is we can't depend on leaders on the top to stay there. We had 10 years, that was great, but leaders come and go. So let's not depend on the top. War is too important to leave to the generals, as somebody said. So here's how I've reformulated it. Build the base. This is the sequence. Build the base, which are students and parents, community. Mobilize the middle, which really is your district, Parramatta Catholic. And intrigue the top. This is an odd way of putting it, but I don't want the top to try to solve the problem, but I don't want them to walk away from it either. So what's going to be best? Then I'm going to say that your job at the base in the middle is how do you intrigue the top? If you want to take internal to Parramatta and you're a school, you want to say, how do I intrigue the central team? If you want to take Parramatta Catholic, you want to say, how do we intrigue the state, New South Wales? So, and we want people at the top to be intrigued by the good examples. So this is very early stuff, but this is a better action-oriented metaphor than I think that I've seen. Let me finish then with a couple of things, and we'll open it up for the last 20 minutes. I put these slides. There's too many words on them in some ways, but you have them, so you can study them. I was thinking of you. I was thinking of Parramatta when I did this, but it means a lot of organization. The nemesis of large organizations, I think, are these four things: that the failure to have an intact sense of identity, well-being, and purpose at the school community level, the need for a cross-school familiar sense of that should be of his typo there. I just did this a couple of nights ago of common destiny reinforced by interaction and progress. We rapport and emotional commitment between schools and the center, your numbers of schools and the new leadership of the center, a realization that connected autonomy is a dynamic concept. So that's one way of putting it. Another way is to say that systemness requires constant attention and cultivation. I have 5 things that are advice for that. One, sense of identity and well-being is a function of the well-being of the entire system and its subparts. In other words, it's hard for an individual to have well-being if the system is dysfunctional. So it's a double combination that way. The pandemic has served notice that human climate and planetary survival depends on local and global systemness. Therefore, it's worth striving for. Local systemness must be seen as part and parcel of state, country, and global systemness. This is the better you get as Parramatta Catholic, the more effective you will be relating to the state and to the country. What became clear in 2023 is the realization of the first time in evolution, we are all system players. I've studied in evolution, I guess, for a dozen years or more. And mostly what it shows is, well, if you go back to Darwin, you look at evolution, and at one point you could be not careful and say, well, evolution always works it out, that it sort of comes, we get better and better. Survival of the fittest, therefore, it's going to be better. But it actually is not like that. If you look at it, and if you break it down in simple terms, the 3 factors that influence the evolution of a system, of the world we're in. One is genes, which is what we usually think of, the genes of evolution and all the things that can be done now that are like incredible. But it's not enough. A second one is culture, the culture in which we or you live. Culture is not something that can be controlled easily by individuals. So it's a context for me. Culture is your context. And the third one is consciousness. Consciousness is the only one that you can directly control. So if you want to see strong evolution, don't expect evolution to save the day. In fact, we're losing ground that way. But do expect, if you combine the knowledge of evolution with the consciousness of what should be done, especially the consciousness of the young, and the cultures of learning that I've described in the last hour, that's the combination that you will find most effective. And then finally, we're bringing every 18 months we have a deep learning lab where we bring our 20 schools together. Not the last 3 years has been virtual, but this year, for the first time in 4 years, we're going to be together physically, and it's going to be in Anaheim, California, in the center where we're working with a lot of these things. So this is it's mostly an in-person event in the middle of California. So that this is featuring not so much me talking and people like me, but our leading projects. I'm sure the Australian Independent Schools New South Wales will be there because they want to report on what they've been learning. So having said all that, I'm going to say, I hope this makes sense. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you. And we're going to, for the last 15 minutes, have some questions from the floor, organized and led by the stuff that somebody at your end. And I'll be really looking forward to reactions. It could be a question, could be an observation, agreeing with me, or it could be a question, either one, a comment or an observation. They both fit in this 15 minutes we have. So over to you.
We have a number of roving mics, so if you would like to make a comment, if you would like to ask a question of Michael, please just stand where you are, signal to one of the people with the mics. We've got Paul, we've got Tim, and we've got Paul up here as well. Love to hear from you. If we could keep the conversation down at this moment, that would be really great. Obviously with the technology, so Michael can hear us. Be really good that we don't have any other background noise in the space.
Thanks, Christine. I have a question over here.
Thanks, Michael, for joining us today. My name's Daniel Lynch, the Head of People and Culture, and my question for you was, what does connected autonomy look, feel and sound like?
That's a very good question because we're trying to sort this out ourselves. We wrote a paper on it, Brendan Spillane, who's from WA, and myself and my son Bailey. We wrote a paper and I sent it over to you. It's about 5 pages long in detail. Connected autonomy, what it feels like and looks like is that you feel like you have a degree of being your own person. Let's take one person individually. And you don't feel isolated, but you feel you have elbow room, you have a degree of autonomy. Simultaneously, you feel you're connected to a functioning developmental group. That group may be the school, it may be the whole diocese, the whole system, but it's this dynamic equilibrium about being aware that I need to be connected. When I'm with the group, I contribute to the group and I learn from the group. When I'm on my own, I'm doing things that are really effective and I don't need permission to do it because I really know what I'm doing, but I always have that connection. So it is, I think it's a real concept, and I can tell you that people like it better than they like the concept collaboration. Collaboration fails to pick up the individual, but we don't want the individual to be running off and working in isolation. So back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When you do back and forth, you consolidate and you learn the best from your peers and you start to learn from yourself. Your own autonomy generates insights.
Thanks, Christine and Michael. Just a question here from John the 23rd, which is one of our preschool to post schools, Michael.
Hi, Michael. My name's Christina, and one of the things that really resonated with me was this collective consciousness of our collective social responsibility to give this agency and autonomy to teachers and to students, so that they then are driving, even from within our organisations, the direction and their passions and their energy. But often the ability to do this, and I'm speaking from our own context, we have we went from 3 or 4 students putting their hand up to be a student leader for the last few years to, in the School of Pathways, so 9 to 12, 60 students put their hand up. So for me, it's how do you navigate the tension between what we as educators perceive as what society wants from us, what the reality of what society actually thinks, and how do we create the space to change? Because often it's that fear that we perceive is out there that stops us.
Well, it's a pretty complicated question, but the fact that you moved up to 60 shows that there's a progression of involvement. And let's also say that this doesn't mean it's smooth sailing, but it's also when a group starts to get the collective development in this direction. And let's look at the checks and balances here. If I have a lot of interaction and I'm the principal of a school, or if I'm in charge of multiple schools, and there's a lot of interaction going on, and I participate as a learner, I don't have to worry about accountability that much, because I'm there. I can see it. I'm part of it. I'm articulating it. So a principal as a learner has to be part of that. So I think that society now is inviting, and your system is inviting, a stronger degree of autonomous expression, but that autonomous expression is not individual and private, it's more and more collective. And then we found that systems change because people influence each other. So I'm pretty confident that that you should take the chance, from what I heard about the climate that the board wants, that the new director wants, that the bishop wants, that you should want at the individual school level, that you can take some chances forward as long as your collective autonomy is sorted out to a degree among that, as long as you're fairly transparent, as long as you're working on good goals. And now is the time to take a risk. And I want to put it this way, because we've seen it in a lot of the schools. I found very few groups that have been censured because they took a positive risk. I think school districts or schools, groups that have been against something, then that's where you get the conflict, and that's understandable. Maybe they should be against it. But when you start doing positive change, you don't find as much opposition. You have more autonomy than you think you have if you sort that out with the group and you start to be more visible because you're doing the right things. So we're saying more and more, you're not as constrained as you think you are. You need to take more risks. Those risks need to be tempered by the fact that the group is working them out. They need to have the checks and balances about it. But it's the risk of moving forward that has to be part of that. And we need to talk about the issues that happen when that occurs, and that's what we do when we work with a group on an ongoing basis.
Another question or a comment from somebody? Don't be shy.
Michael, just going to another school. It's one of our large primary schools, and we've got a new team there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Michael, firstly, for always sharing your research and learning and being that model for us in terms of learning. The action lenses, the 4 that you mentioned, intrigued me in the sense that I think when you go to schools, and you would probably experience this as well, they do have that contextual knowledge, or they're learning to get to know each other and have that spirit work and that systemness. I guess my wondering for you is twofold. One is, are you seeing a global change in terms of how we measure education and success? Because you have a wide lens over different countries as well as systems. And secondly, if not, how do we keep intriguing our governments and our communities to see the value of education? Because as we look at those action lenses, it's not just about numerical number.
Good question. We are seeing a change at the policy level in the discussions about the need to move away from a NAP plan-like measure only into the wider set of measures that have to do with the global competencies. So we're definitely seeing that change. You could follow the work that Sandra Milligan and her team has been doing the last 4 years. We're partners with them, and they actually have new metrics to measure the global competencies and instead of other narrower, I'm going to say, academic measures. We're not so much against keeping NAP plan. I mean, keeping NAP plan is, for me, okay, provided it's not dominant in the way it has been as the wrong steering mechanism. And that I can also tell you, when you see our new book on drivers, you can look at Anaheim's high school district, and they have totally bypassed the state measures and instead have developed a set of measures that are around the competencies. They have 5 competencies. They're identical to our 6 because they combined 2 of them. And they have what they call capstone initiatives that students produce that are measures of their proficiency in the competencies. So their outcomes are the capstone performance, and it's based on those that they get awarded a degree. It's also the case in the US that the traditional measures of coming from high school that are technical tests, there are 2 of them, that those have now been rejected by most universities, and that most universities are moving to a more qualitative version of how to assess the school graduates in terms of entry into university. So I'm going to say we're in the midst of, for the first time in my life, I've seen it prominently not only discussed, but I've seen forays into the new way of doing it. Still early stages, but I'm predicting it has momentum, and you can find it via Sandra Milligan, and you can find it also anybody who's involved in the deep learning work. The independent schools as a group, the way they banded together in New South Wales. If you look at what they're measuring, they are measuring that they're continuing to take into account NAPLAN, but they're going beyond NAPLAN to measure the competence that I'm talking about as indicators of the performance of their students, not just at the end, but earlier in their age groups.
And we've probably got time for one more question. Who would like to pose that?
Question here. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Michael, for your presentation. It's always wonderful to hear you speak. My name's Jo Kirby and I'm the leader of New Metrics at St Luke's Catholic College. And it's really pleasing to see that there's a lot of movement in prioritising the 6 Cs that you've mentioned before. And I know the work of Sandra Milligan and her partnership schools have made some inroads in terms of how we can recognise and then develop tools that assess and represent those competencies, and there's a lot of work to go there. My question is that obviously this will involve a shift in instructional design. What sort of challenges have your NPDL schools encountered as they've tried to focus or also align these competencies with content as they've moved forward? And how did they overcome them?
That's a big question, and you need to be almost have an hour-long conversation with how we do that. There's 2 things happening there. One is that the pedagogy of this kind of learning, of the pedagogy of the competencies, has shifted, as you know, from the student as recipient of knowledge, the student as proactive combining with the teachers and with others to develop this. And so in our books, we have many, many case studies of what that looks like and how it can be done and how it's developed. So we see a major shift in pedagogy and where the student playing much more of a partnership role. And then within that, there's a sub issue that I'm very much interested in, which is the growing finding that deep learning is good for all students. It's especially good for students who are having difficulty. And so they will gain in some ways the most. So I think we have liberated students, and this is where equity and equality come into place, because they find the competencies once they get going to be more meaningful as a learning proposition than getting a better grade on math. It does both because they start to do the projects, but it starts to combine the two and put it in perspective. So, and I think also also one of the drivers we'd be looking at is the relationship between social intelligence and machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, and the new GPT chatbot that's come out. It came out November 22nd. Right now, and one of my senior members immediately, just to be a bit playful, asked a very tough question to chatbot GPT, what's the role of equity in modern society? And within 5 seconds, he got a cogent essay of 510 words that sounded okay, sounded good. And what I'm saying that way is that's actually not the answer, but it causes us to say, what's the social intelligence that drives the artificial intelligence? Not how do we become on the receiving end of artificial intelligence. So I think there's some big changes in the offing on that, and we will see in the pedagogy of this that very new pedagogies that students start to lead the way, and we have our own charts. We can say traditional teaching looks like this. Here are the 8 dimensions. Deep learning technology looks like this. Here are the comparable other 8. And students want to move to that. Teachers want to move to that. And when they start to moving to that, they get more motivated, they get more engaged, sense of purpose goes up, and all of those things are happening. And I really do think, let me end with this, I do think 2 things. One, that students who have been disadvantaged are much more likely to find the new way motivating for them. That's one thing. And the second is, there's a book, I like the phrase, but it's also true, who identified that students who are academically pushed and themselves pushing on their family and all the emphasis, that they were having excessive stress, and he called them the wounded winners. The wounded winners are those that were into the academic rat race, let's call it that, but also paid the price of it because eventually it wasn't what they wanted to be in this life. So I think we have not only helping equality and inequity, but we also have helping all students, the vast majority of them, in a whole new way of learning. And that will be the transformation that counts.
Thank you, Michael. I'd now like to invite Kathy Hay, Principal of Trinity Primary School, to move a vote of thanks to Michael.
Thank you, Christine. Michael, on behalf of those gathered here today, I'd like to thank you for the wisdom you've shared with us. As Christine mentioned, many of us have heard you speak and read your literature, and yet every time we do, we gain something more from it. The insights, the provocations about the possibilities in our roles. Our work ahead, as mentioned by both Bishop Vincent and Jack de Groot this morning, and then reinforced through your presentation, is about collegiality, connected autonomy, and synodality. Michael, today you've tied this together for us in a very practical, optimistic, and inspiring way that will provoke thoughtful consideration as our teams work throughout this year and beyond, with the confidence to take those risks. Finally, we look forward to reading your book and using it as a guide to guide our practice, both in the local context and as a system. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much, everybody. have a great couple of days, and I hope to see you in the near future.
Thank you very much, Michael. We now have an opportunity to move to morning tea. While we're at morning tea, we'll post on the...